You cross the threshold of your home after an exhausting day full of hustle and bustle, deadlines, and sometimes unpleasant interactions. Your hand instinctively reaches for the lock, and there you are, silence. But it's not oppressive, broken only by the patter of clawed paws on the floor or a soft purr from the windowsill. You haven't even taken off your coat, but you're already starting to talk. Can you imagine what a day it's been? You talk about your boss's unfair remark, about a funny incident in the cafe, about finally finishing that difficult project. And then, mid-sentence, it dawns on you, you're having a full-blown monologue with a being who likely doesn't understand the meaning of your words. A fleeting awkwardness arises, a feeling as if you're doing something socially unacceptable, a little childish. Stop. Push that feeling aside. If this situation sounds familiar, you're not alone, and you're certainly not a weirdo. What you're intuitively doing is a manifestation of one of the healthiest and most effective psychological self-regulation mechanisms, the search for a safe channel for emotional release. From the outside, this behavior is often attributed to loneliness. They probably have no one else to talk to. Or they're labeled infantilism. They're acting like a child, talking to a pet. But the reality, as is often the case, is much more complex and interesting than stereotypes. The truth is that the reason you talk to your pet isn't because you lack communication, but because you're searching for a special, unique quality. You may have a loving family, loyal friends, and an active social circle, but it's with your pet that you feel absolutely and unconditionally psychologically safe. Why? Because pets are perhaps the only living beings in our world who can give us their attention in its purest form, without the slightest hint of judgment, evaluation, or hidden agenda. In their eyes, you'll see no boredom, no criticism, no desire to turn the conversation on themselves, no silent reproach. Their attention is a gift, devoid of any subtext.
In psychology, there's a powerful term for this phenomenon: emotional containment. Our brain, especially after an eventful day, resembles a seething cauldron of thoughts, worries, unspoken remarks, and vague feelings. This chaos needs an outlet. By speaking all this out loud to your cat or dog, you're doing much more than just chatter. You're undertaking the complex task of structuring your inner chaos. You're articulating the problem, which means bringing it out of the realm of vague anxiety and into the realm of concreteness. You hear your own words, and this allows you to see the situation from a distance, making it more tangible and therefore more manageable. Your pet at this moment becomes that very container, a reliable and silent vessel that absorbs all your emotional noise, all your accumulated fatigue and irritation, and in return bestows upon you a feeling of cleansing, peace, and calm. This isn't a quirk, it's an act of profound and wise self-care, accessible to anyone sensitive enough to recognize it. This process has not only a subjective, but also a strictly scientific biochemical basis. Numerous studies in neurobiology and psychophysiology demonstrate that tactile contact with an animal, as well as calm, intimate conversation with one, triggers specific physiological responses in our bodies. When you gaze into the devoted eyes of your dog or hear the measured purr of a cat in your lap, your pituitary gland begins to actively produce oxytocin, a neuropeptide often called the bondage hormone, love and social trust. It's responsible for feelings of calm, security, and emotional closeness. At the same time, blood levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone responsible for the fight-or-flight response, and, in the long term, causing serious damage to both mental and physical health, decrease. Your body, at its most basic biological level, thanks you for this type of interaction. People who regularly and naturally interact with their pets, on average, show lower levels of anxiety, suffer less from burnout, and generally rate their psychological well-being higher. They found more than just a hobby or entertainment. They've discovered a natural, readily available, and side-effect-free antidepressant.
In our hyper-socialized world, where every word, every emotion is publicly judged, weighed on invisible scales of social acceptability, and often contested, we face a fundamental deficit. We sorely lack the ability to simply be heard. Heard not to receive unsolicited advice, not to garner approval or compete in eloquence, but simply to speak out and know that your words, your experiences have been accepted, not lost in the void, but resonated with, even if that resonation is silent. It is precisely in this regard that a pet becomes the ideal, unrivaled conversationalist. They are the living embodiment of unconditional empathy. They won't interrupt you with, "But when I was your age." They won't respond with a story that instantly shifts the focus to themselves. He won't utter a dismissive, "Don't sweat the small stuff," or a reproachful, "I told you so." The only thing that matters to him at that moment is the sound of your voice, your presence, the very energy of your interaction. This simplicity is the source of his profound, almost therapeutic magic. If you look closely at people for whom such dialogues have become a natural part of their lives, you can identify several psychological types, each of which is completely normal and adaptive. First, there's the type that can be loosely called the emotional realist. This person doesn't shy away from society or suffer from a lack of communication. On the contrary, he possesses a sober, realistic view of human nature. He understands that trust in people is fragile, that even the closest ones can let you down, misunderstand you, or judge you. His pet, on the other hand, is a guaranteed source of unconditional support, a being who is always by his side. Choosing such a conversational partner isn't an escape from reality, but rather a conscious, rational decision in favor of psychological hygiene and safety. The second type is the self-sufficient introvert. For this type, solitude isn't a punishment, but a resource, a prerequisite for recuperation and a comfortable environment. They aren't drawn to noisy company and don't require constant external stimulation. Their inner world is rich and fulfilling. And in this world, a pet becomes the ideal companion, one who shares a space of silence without disturbing it, yet is always ready to become a living sound catcher for their owner's thoughts and experiences. This is a union of two self-sufficient beings based on mutual respect for personal space.
The third type is the exploratory empath. This person doesn't simply project human emotions and behavior patterns onto an animal in a fit of sentimentality. Their communication with their pet is much deeper. They engage in a constant, subtle dialogue based on observation and intuition. They pick up on the slightest nuances in behavior: a tilt of the head, an expressive gaze, the timbre of a purr, or the wagging of a tail. They read the reciprocal emotions and interpret them, building a complex nonverbal communication system. For them, this isn't a monologue, but a full-fledged, deep dialogue, taking place in the language of mutual feelings. Thus, talking with a pet isn't a compensation for the lack of human communication, but a conscious choice in favor of a qualitatively different, safer format. You see this creature as more than just an animal serving as a home decoration or an object of care. You see them as a loyal friend, a family member, and most importantly, a quiet but reliable haven. An island of silent solace in the turbulent ocean of social anxiety and tension. These relationships are built not on words or obligations, but on a foundation of pure, silent empathy and mutual acceptance. So, what unites all the people who unashamedly share their thoughts with our fellow creatures? They share an intuitive, sustainable, and effective way of managing their emotional state. They have discovered a channel that allows them to give healthy outlet to their inner tension without exposing themselves to the risk of misunderstanding or criticism. They have managed to create a personal island of psychological safety amidst a sea of social anxiety and tension. And if you recognize yourself in this description, you have no reason to doubt your adequacy or normalcy. On the contrary, you are a person who has demonstrated wisdom and learned to carefully nurture their mental well-being. You found the one who understands you without words, accepts you unconditionally, and supports you in any situation. It doesn't matter that this someone is covered in fur, communicates with a tail and purrs and doesn't speak human language. Their understanding is genuine, and their support is priceless.